Part two, let's look at the matchup of the Notre Dame defense against the Notre Dame offense or the Texas A&M offense. And this is where, like, if you go back and look at the offensive numbers against Notre Dame's offense, A&M's defense, they're somewhat competitive. There's the assumption that the offensive line for Notre Dame will struggle enough to where it makes it a battle that A&M potentially could win. But Notre Dame has the advantage in the pass game. A&M has the advantage in the run game, but they were both good last year. Overall scoring, Notre Dame has clear as the advantage. When you flip the argument to the other side, it's not close. It's far bigger gap between the A&M offense last year and the Notre Dame defense last year. Notre Dame will have the same defense it did last year schematically. Obviously, lots of new players. A&M is going to look a whole lot different, and that's going to make this a very intriguing a breakdown to dive into, because when you look at Texas A&M running the football last year, it's an offense that struggled to run the football. They ranked 92nd in the country in yards per game, 95th in yards per play, 100th in yard 20-plus runs. They only had 11, and they ranked 42nd in tackles for loss allowed. Notre Dame's run defense last year ranked 28th overall, 24th in yards per attempt, 48th in 20-plus yard runs allowed. They were 53rd in tackles for loss. This isn't a team that generated a ton of tackles for loss last season, but the overall numbers clearly give the advantage to Notre Dame. That's when you have to then factor in, okay, well, this is a different offense than it was last year. The offensive system last year was geared towards what? It was geared towards throwing the football. It was Bobby Petrino, Jim Bill Fisher. They wanted to throw the football. Well, enter Colin Klein, who is a guy that believes in a little bit different. He wants to be balanced. Colin Klein at Kansas State last year led an offense that ranked 12th in the country last season in total rushing yards at 204.1 yards per game. Now, the impressive part about that is not only did they rank 14th in rushing yards last year, they did, or 12th in rushing yards last year. They did that the year after they lost Deuce Vaughn. They actually ranked, they didn't run for as many yards as they did in 2022. They actually ran for 208.3 yards in 2022, but they ranked higher because remember, last year you had some clock rules that made things different. So they were 15th in rushing in 2022 with Deuce Vaughn. They jumped up to 12th in rushing last year without Deuce Vaughn, where DJ Giddens was your top running back. So he's a guy that likes to run the football. That's great. Sure, you like to run the football, but do you know how to run the football? And Colin Klein certainly knows how to run the football and has done a great job developing good rushing teams at Kansas State during his tenure there. They ranked 63rd in his first year as offensive coordinator. So we saw a very big jump in his last two seasons rushing the football from Colin Klein. And of course, let's not forget, this is a guy that as a quarterback in college ran for 1,000 yards one season and 27 touchdowns. I think we brought that up the other day. I think it was 2011. Yeah, he ran for 1,141 yards and 27 touchdowns in 2011. And then in 2012, he ran for 925 yards and 23 touchdowns. So the guy rushed for 50 touchdowns by himself his last 2 years. So guess what? He's going to try to run the football. It's going to be way different than it was for A&M in the past couple years. They're going to run the inside zones and the duos, but they're going to run a lot of gap scheme, a lot of pin and pull stuff. They're not going to rely on just having bullies up front. They're going to try to create creases in the run game. They're going to try to use their tight end alignments and motions and shifts to create some spacing that is going to give them some, ideally, in theory, give them some advantages in the run game. You know, the thought being the more gaps that we can create, the more gaps you have to be accountable for, the more surfaces we have to try to create run lanes. And so you're going to see that. They went out and added, I think Trevor talked about this yesterday, they added, I think, 3 new tight ends to their roster. There's a reason for that, because Colin Klein likes to use the tight ends. And so you're going to see a much different running team than last year. Now, you can look at the stats and say, yeah, they got a ways to go. And there's no doubt they've got a ways to go. But you kind of have to look at those stats and say, okay, they may tell us something about the offensive line, and that's an issue for Texas A&M. There's no doubt. They've got good enough. I mean, Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels are certainly good enough to put up very good numbers this year if the line plays well. And as Al Golden said yesterday, and we said the same thing yesterday, they expect that Connor Wegman's going to run more this year because that's kind of what Colin Klein does. So I do expect A&M to be a better running team this year than they were last year. The question is going to be how much better and when do they get better? Are they going to be better immediately against Notre Dame, or is it going to take them some games to kind of get rolling? Do they maybe struggle a little bit against Notre Dame early, but then go out and get better and better as the season goes on? And I often talk about, when people say, oh, you lose early, you're done. I often talk about that Ohio State 2014 season as sort of my example for why I just think that is just an incredible reaction. Because when you think about that Ohio State team and you think about, what changed for them that year, well, they couldn't really run the ball early in the year. As their run game finally took off, that became a much more dangerous team. And that allowed them to go out there and have a lot of success that season. And I think it was year 3 in Tom Herman. But again, that was year 3. This is year 1 of Colin Klein and game 1 of Colin Klein. So how quickly can he really get that going? That's going to be the question. And that's going to determine a lot about this matchup because, look, I'll get into the pass game next, but just big picture, I don't know that Texas A&M can score enough points to win if they can't at least somehow establish the run game. They have to, and they don't have to run for 200 yards against Notre Dame. I don't think that's going to happen, but they have to at least make Notre Dame work in the run game to then maybe you have to insert your safety a little bit more to stop the run. You have to use your safeties to come down and account for the quarterback runs, the cutbacks, or the pin and pulls. And hey, we're going to use our motions and get you kind of an overloaded surface and just kind of down block, kick out our linemen and say, hey, if you're going to stop this run, your safeties and corners are going to have to stop it. All right, cool. So Notre Dame flies their safeties and corners come down. Next thing you know, they're running some sort of, whether it be a halfback pass or most likely sort of an option pass or some kind of bootleg or something along those lines, an RPO where you bang down on your backside safety and you're just hitting that glance route behind it for a big play. There's a lot of things that A&M is going to do differently this year that present different options. And if they can't get the run game going at all, if Notre Dame is able to shut that down, then they're going to have a very tough time scoring enough points to win outside of turnovers and special teams giving them easy scores. That's really going to be the key. They're going to have to figure out a way to get the run game going. For Notre Dame, you want to keep A&M off schedule. It's the opposite of what I talked about on the other side of the ball. You want to get them into passing downs. You want to force Connor Wegman to beat you from the pocket. Not that he's not a talented player, can't do it, but again, that's where you think you have an advantage, just like A&M wants to slow down the Notre Dame run game and get them in third and longs. Same thing is true on this side. Connor Wegman's a very good football player, not overly experienced. He's a very talented football player. But like a lot of young quarterbacks, he's not a guy you want sitting in the pocket on 3rd and 7 or 2nd and 12 or 2nd and 11 or 2nd and 9 all day throwing the football. Because he doesn't have the receiving core to go out there and really hurt you in some of those big moments like, let's say, Ohio State did last year with Kyle McCord, because he had a Emeka Egbuka and he had Marvin Harrison Jr. and he had Julian Fleming. So even though you pretty much shut the pass game down for most of the game, they were able to make enough of those not big plays like long plays, but clutch plays, moving the chains on 4th and 7, converting to 3rd and 19 to be able to win the game. And that's going to be the question is, can they get to the 17 that Ohio State was able to get to last year to beat Notre Dame? That's going to be the key if the Notre Dame offense doesn't get better. And so that's going to be a big part of this game. Notre Dame stopping the run game and making this a pocket game for Connor Wegman, because if he does that, they're gonna struggle, because that's not where Colin Klein's offense thrives, and it's not where you want to put this team in that situation. But it's going to come down to this: these numbers have to play themselves out on Saturday. It's going to be a big key to this game. Get to the next part of the matchup, and that's the pass game matchup. This is a very intriguing aspect of this game because, again, I just broke down the numbers for Colin Klein, right? And the run game improvement is going to be a lot better. There's going to be a lot of run game improvement from Colin Klein. How much, how early, all those things are going to factor into this particular matchup, but he's going to eventually get it going. The flip side is true on the other, right? In the other side, because last year, Texas A&M did throw for a lot of yards. They were 30th in the country in passing yards, 23rd in yards per attempt, 36th in yards per completion. Those are all respectable numbers. 21st in the country in 30-plus yard passes, 35th in efficiency. And when you consider that they played all but 4 games with their backup quarterbacks, that factors into it. They would have been even higher had Connor Wegman not gone down last season, right? Like, that's just the reality of it. If you're still a top 30 pass offense and you spent 2/3 of the year without your starting quarterback, those are good numbers. Now, the question is going to be, can they continue those numbers? Because when you look at the other side, and I talked about how good Colin Klein's offense was last year at running the football, they were not a great passing team last year. They finished 54th in the country in passing yards per game, and they finished 60th in the country in yards per pass attempt last season. And Kansas State last season also finished 51st in passer rating, 30 touchdowns, 10 picks. They were a team that, in my view, 72nd in completion percentage. And that was with a quarterback that I keep being told by national media people is a top 5 Heisman finalist or candidate for this season, which I say sarcastically. I just don't buy that at all. But they're not. He doesn't have the intricate NFL pro style sort of scheme that Bobby Petrino had and that Jimbo Fisher had. What he's going to do, however, is he's going to build the pass game around the run game. And that's why I say it's so important to stop the run. Because if they can't run the football, I don't know that Colin Klein's the kind of coach that's going to be able to generate enough scheme-wise in the pass game to beat you. Now, where I do think Texas A&M presents some matchups is they're not a team that's going to provide a ton of speed. We'll get into that here in a second. But they have really good size. Ja'Day Walker, 6'4", Noah Thomas is 6'6". They're guys that if you have to commit too many resources to the run game to stop it, can win some one-on-ones just by simply outplaying you for the football. They are going to use their tight ends a lot more than they have in the past, in my opinion. A&M's or Kansas State's leading receiver last year was a tight end. You know, will they be able to get that kind of production this season? We'll find out. But you compare that, top 30 pass game last year, new coordinator was more of a top 50 kind of guy, and you're matching that up against what is one of the best pass defenses in the country. And one of the interesting things about this matchup that just kind of shows me that the national media really didn't pay attention to Notre Dame last year. Like, they'll in one breath mention Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts, and then next breath talk about how how's Notre Dame going to handle the Connor Wegman and the athleticism of the A&M offense. And I kind of chuckle a little bit about that because, I mean, this is a Notre Dame team that in the last 2 years has faced C.J. Stroud, has faced Caleb Williams twice, has faced Drake May, has faced Tanner McKee, Jaron Hall. I mean, we can go down the list of quarterbacks that this team has faced last couple of years, and guess what? The pass defense has been lights out. Spencer Rattler, pass defense has been outstanding in almost all of those instances. You're talking about a Notre Dame team last year that finished in the top 5 in fewest passing yards per game, fewest passing yards per attempt. They tied Michigan for the fewest touchdown passes allowed. They ranked number 1 in college football last year in pass efficiency defense. And I don't have this stat on here, and I should add it this year, but Notre Dame, I believe, finished 2nd last season in lowest completion percentage allowed. Yes, they were 2nd behind only Florida State last season at 52.4. So that's another category. Their worst category that I have marked here in passing last year was yards allowed per completion, and they ranked 12th. They ranked 7th in most passing plays allowed by 30 yards or more. And if you look at least off the top of my head, 3 of those 30-plus yard pass plays came in late in games when Notre Dame was winning by a bunch. And so that's an aspect of it that you factor in as well. Is A&M going to really be able to protect or throw the football effectively enough against this pass defense that returns 2 All-Americans, and their 2 transfers are a 6-year and a 5th-year senior? And your only young guy in the starting lineup is Christian Gray, who might be your most physically gifted player that you have at the position. So this is an area where Notre Dame has a big advantage, in my opinion. They have a personnel advantage. They have a schematic advantage. The question is going to be, does the run game of Texas A&M improve enough and play well enough to force this into a throwing game? If it is forced into a throwing game, it's a definitely advantage Notre Dame. if it becomes about balance and A&M's allowed to throw a lot of second and short, third and short to medium situations where they still have the threat of the run and they can use their RPO game and their play action game and their misdirection game with the pass and all their motions and shifts to try to generate guys free, that's when you can get in trouble. That's really where you can say, hey, look, can this Notre Dame team go out and stop the run? If they stop the run, then I think that leads right into a dominant matchup here. And so that's what's going to make this very, very intriguing, this matchup. Looking overall last year, Notre Dame ranked 7th in scoring defense. A&M ranked 25th in scoring offense. Notre Dame ranked 5th in fewest yards allowed. They ranked 5th in fewest yards per play. A&M ranked 50th in total offense, 49th in yards per play. They ranked second in red zone defense. They ranked 3rd in red zone touchdown defense. A&M ranked 48th and 82nd. Notre Dame ranked 30th in third down defense. A&M was 32nd in third down offense. That's the only one that's really close in this matchup. Notre Dame ranked 15th in 30-plus yards, the yard plays allowed. A&M ranked 35th in 30-plus yard plays gained. Notre Dame ranked 13th in turnovers gained. And A&M ranked 112th last year in turnovers lost. Actually, the 13 number is not accurate. Let me go see what their turnover numbers were last year. I believe that is incorrect. Let me just pull this up real quick and make sure that I am okay. So they ranked last year. They ranked 33rd in turnovers lost, their offense. So the 112 is incorrect. They lost. I don't know actually what I have there. They had 13 gained, which ranked 110th last season. They were 33rd in turnovers lost. So that's a better number than that number shows, but Notre Dame ranked 13th in turnovers gained. So when you look at this matchup and you look at this game, the thing you have to ask yourself is Notre Dame in a situation where they can control the matchups the way that they're supposed to, where they have the advantages? And can they get into situations where, let me just I'm just gonna put that person in timeout. I don't have the patience today for just stupidity. I really don't. So I'll have to have Vince edit this part out. I just don't have time for just stupid people. I really don't. If you look at the on paper matchup and you look at how this game is going to play out, there's the concern, the angst that Notre Dame fans have, which is justified. Can the offensive line hold up against what is going to be, in my opinion, it is one of the best defensive lines of college football, and what I think is going to be one of the best young middle linebackers in college football, and Torian York, who I'm a very, very big fan of, by the way. Can they hold up in that matchup? That could be a scenario where the reason there is understandable angst, because that matchup is such that depending on how much A&M dominates it, it could impact every other part of the game. If you get dominated up front, then you're going to struggle to run the ball. If you struggle to run the ball, it's going to be harder to throw the football. If you can't move the football and score points, that puts way more pressure on your defense. It keeps the game close. It means Colin Klein doesn't have to get into his, too deep in his bag of tricks. He can play the field position battle, and then he can do some things schematically with the run game, with motions, with shifts, with leverages, different things like that to hopefully create enough big plays to win a 17-14 game like they did last year, like Ohio State did last year. And that's going to really be the big key to this game, is that matchup right there. What's not being discussed enough, in my opinion, is while that is a legitimate concern, an absolutely legitimate concern, if A&M wins this game, it's going to be about their defensive line, front seven, dominating Notre Dame and turnovers. That's what it's going to come down to. But what's not being discussed enough is Notre Dame has the same ability to do to the Texas A&M offense what they expect the A&M defense to do to the Notre Dame offense. There's this expectation that Texas A&M is going to dominate the Notre Dame offense. Okay, I understand where that's coming from. And when you look at the numbers and you look at what Texas A&M was last year, again, 36th in the country in scoring defense, that's not bad when you consider some of the issues they had on offense. When you look at their pass defense last year, not great. Their run defense was excellent last year. They add Nick Scourton to the mix. They add Solomon DeShields to the mix. They add Scooby Williams to the mix. They add, I think they had 3 other D-line transfers who were good football players that are being added to the mix. But that's going against a Notre Dame offense that was pretty good statistically last year, was pretty good outside of playing some elite defenses in just one game where they just flat out laid an egg against Louisville. But then you look at it and you say, but does A&M, is their defense such that they're just going to completely shut down Notre Dame the way that Ohio State's defense did? Is that what we're thinking that this offense or this defense is? Is this A&M defense going to be like Ohio State? That's going to be the question. Maybe it will be. And you're adding a great defensive mind in Mike Elko to the equation. But Notre Dame is also adding a pretty successful offensive mind. And that's where I kind of get frustrated with this conversation is, somebody say, do you think A&M can beat Notre Dame? Of course Texas A&M can beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame lost to a 4-loss Clemson team on the road last year, folks. If Clemson's with 8 starters missing can beat Notre Dame, if Louisville can beat Notre Dame on the road, then of course A&M can beat Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. The frustration that I have is that there's this obsession on focusing on one part of this game. I just laid out the numbers to y'all. Which side of the ball has the bigger advantage? The A&M defense over the Notre Dame offense, even though they have no statistical advantage over Notre Dame, or the Notre Dame defense against the Texas A&M offense? Again, yards per game and yards per play. Rushing, Notre Dame's defense 28th and 24th, A&M's offense 91st and 95th. Passing, Notre Dame's defense in yards per game and yards per attempt, 3rd and 3rd. You return 2 All-Americans from that group. A&M's offense, 30th and 23rd. But their new coach that's being brought in ranks in the 50s in both of those categories. Right? So, and then you look at total defense. Notre Dame last year in points per game on defense, 7th, yards per game, 5th, yards per play, 5th. A&M ranked 25th, 50th, and 49th. So I'm to believe that a team in Notre Dame who averaged more points per game offensively last year than A&M, more yards per play than A&M last year, gave up fewer yards points per game than A&M last year, gave up fewer yards per game last year, gave up fewer yards per play, dominates A&M in every category, is a team that can't handle what A&M is going to bring to them. That's my frustration with this conversation. Can A&M win? Heck yeah, they can win. And you guys know my feelings on Mike Elko. I've been saying him here since this show started. Love Mike Elko. Great football coach. But Notre Dame should be expected to win this game. There's no question that they should be expected to win this game. And if they can't, that's a problem for me. But the expectation should be that Notre Dame is going to go in there and win. And I don't know, other than just paranoia and just choosing to be negative, I don't see why someone would look at this game and say that A&M is the team that has less to prove than Notre Dame. That's the frustration I have. It's like somebody said, well, Notre Dame tends to lose these games. I mean, okay. Last 2 years, Notre Dame has gone 7-4 against ranked teams. Okay. Do you know what Texas A&M's record against ranked teams is the last 2 years? 3-7. 2 of those wins were over a ranked Miami team 2 years ago who finished 5-7, and over a ranked Arkansas team who finished that year 7-6. That's 2 of their 3 ranked wins. And yet Notre Dame, who's got 7 wins over ranked opponents the last 2 years, including multiple on the road, and then Notre Dame also beat an NC State team who finished who was ranked most of the year. They weren't ranked when they played, and it gets frustrating. It gets taxing, to be honest with you, when the same people come on the chat, come on the board with nonstop negativity, but can't make a sound argument other than I feel. That's it. I feel like Notre Dame, can't throw in this situation. Okay, well, you have no evidence to back up that can't happen with any consistency. I feel like Notre Dame doesn't ever win these kind of games. Okay, well, tell me when A&M does. I feel like this. I feel like that. When everything about this matchup should say that Notre Dame has the advantage. Does that mean Notre Dame's going to win? Of course it doesn't mean Notre Dame's definitely going to win. That's why you play the games. But to sit there and say that this is a game that Notre Dame has more to prove than Texas A&M, that we should assume that Texas A&M is in a better situation than Notre Dame. There's no argument other than your feelings that makes you feel that way. That's my frustration. There's no okay, well, yeah, but the A&M D line against Notre Dame. Okay, last I checked, this isn't a jersey scrimmage where it's just the Notre Dame offense against just the Notre Dame defense. Notre Dame had one of the 10 best defenses of college football last year. Right? Where was the Texas A&M defense last year? It's very good. Wasn't as good as Notre Dame's. Notre Dame's offense was, for all the whining about Notre Dame's offense from last year, they ranked in the top 10 in scoring. What did A&M's offense do last year? They ranked 25th. Notre Dame's defense last season ranked in the 7th in scoring defense. A&M's defense last year ranked 36th in scoring. So again, I ask you, other than your feelings, what's the argument that should make you as a Notre Dame fan or an analyst say that, gee, I just don't think Notre Dame can win this game? That's my problem. Now, can A&M win? Again, of course. This isn't going to be an easy win. And I'll have some responses to some of the stuff in the buy sell hold about that. But Notre Dame has the advantage on paper. Notre Dame has had, in the last 5 years, it's the other one. A&M's got more talent. Okay, based on what? Recruiting rankings. Half the players from that team that were ranked number 1 are gone. The last 5 drafts, Notre Dame has had 27 players drafted. I think it's 10 in the first 2 rounds. A&M's had 17 guys drafted, 2 in the first 2 rounds. So again, other than the fact that they have an SEC logo on their jersey, what's the reason for Notre Dame expecting? And honestly, I kind of feel bad for Texas A&M fans because if they win this game, it's a huge win. I mean, it is a huge win. But the way that Notre Dame's being talked about, I wonder if it's going to tamp down some of the excitement over the win. And if they lose, there's this expectation that they got upset by an inferior opponent when in reality they wouldn't have. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Is I feel like the narrative about this game is as frustrating as any game I've covered in a long time. It really is. And a friend of mine kind of brought this up. He said it reminds him a lot of the 2018 Notre Dame-Michigan game, where a lot of people felt Notre Dame didn't have a chance. They got to replace Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey and had 3 new stars in on there, and then you lost Equinemi St. Brown and you lost some good players off your defense, and just like, man, this Michigan team's going to be a playoff team and yada, yada, yada. And Notre Dame dominated that game. The game was never as close as the final score. Notre Dame dominated that game. So that's kind of where I'm at, right? It's just, if you're a Notre Dame fan thinking that this is a game that Notre Dame is not the better team, then I don't know what to tell you. Either you don't have no clue how what Notre Dame has done, or you have never watched A&M in the last 5 years. I mean, that's kind of like Duke game last year. Notre Dame played terrible against Duke last year, still won. I mean, think about that. Still won. Played terrible last year. So I think A&M has a lot more to prove to Notre Dame. However, from a practical standpoint of like actual football, from a perception standpoint, I will agree that this is a much bigger game for Notre Dame than it is Texas A&M. There's no doubt from a perception standpoint. And hopefully they can go out and get a win. So that's going to do it for the stats breakdown. I'm going to get into just a brief talk about game records next, and going to have some fun with that. And then we'll get into our buy, sell, hold. So, but before we do, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. And as always, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.